You must understand that Islamophobia is a cornerstone and a pillar of Christian Zionism and also Jewish Zionism. You have to make the other person an enemy. You have to make them evil. You have to make them subhuman, but in such a way that it looks like it's legitimate, that it's not evil, but it's legitimate, it's justified, you know.
The justice of the Palestinian cause awakens people around the world to the importance of being on the side of human rights and justice. Pamela Ngubane was a pro-Christian Zionism buying their narrative. However, she was able to make a diametrical change in her life and thought abandoning Christian Zionism, dedicating her effort to supporting the rights of the Palestinian people, describing that as life journey from darkness to enlightenment. Pamela is working today to expose the abuse of the Bible by Christian Zionists in order to shield Israel from scrutiny of its crimes against the Palestinian people. She is an evangelical who works for the Evangelical Alliance of South Africa. Pamela is joining us via Skype from South Africa now to talk about her journey from no love for Palestine to embracing Palestine. Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you very much for having me.
And,
good evening.
Thank you very much. And I would like to start with you, with your journey from no love for Palestine to embracing Palestine. Tell us about that.
So I had a born-again experience. The Christians talk about when you rediscover, or if you were a Christian before, or if you become a disciple of Jesus, it's called being born again. So I had that experience. And after that, I started watching lots of Christian television programming to understand more about the history of the Bible, of Jesus, you know, the Jewish and Hebrew roots of the Bible and of Jesus. And in the process, I watched a lot of Christian Zionist programming, not knowing that it was Christian Zionism. I just thought this was fact. This was what was missing from Christianity. And that, you know, we were taught through these programs that you, as a Christian, have a responsibility to help the Jewish people, to support the state of Israel. And so I met with the Jewish Zionist leadership in South Africa, initially just to learn more so that I could also understand why the African National Congress had passed a resolution in 2017 to downgrade the embassy of South Africa in Israel to a liaison office. And being a very vocal person who believes in human rights, I honestly believed that the Jewish people needed my support. And so I pledged my support to them. And, you know, a few months later, I was hired as the general manager of South African Friends of Israel, which is a subsidiary of the South African Zionist Federation. And so in that job, I went to a lot of churches, teaching them about Christian Zionism, convincing them to support the state of Israel, talking about all the biblical prophecies that have regard to Israel, the Jews returning to the land, the Messiah ruling from Jerusalem. And throughout that process, I was imbibing propaganda, but believing it to be the truth. So when this latest government of Israel, of Netanyahu, was sworn in November, December last year, I started to ask some questions, you know, like what were we actually supporting? Because these ultra extremists in the government, they are anti-Christian and they are very much anti the two-state solution. So I pointed out that in order to remain credible as a Black Christian woman myself, I couldn't promote Israel the way I had been doing. So I started to propose that we have dialogues for peace with the Palestinian supporters and with the Israel supporters, and in that way lay a groundwork of finding common ground, because it became very clear to me that the two-state solution was being undermined with the repeal of the Disengagement Act, and also with just the very cruel behavior, such as in Huwara and things like Masa Fariata. I could tell that they were going to accelerate under this new government. So I said, let's start talking peace. My bosses weren't interested, but I started doing the research on my own with the view that I would convince them after I had done this research. This research obviously means learning about the Palestinian narrative, because the Zionist narrative about Palestine is that if the Palestinian people had better leadership, they would have a state now, they would be free now from Israeli domination. But obviously that's not the fact, because the fact is Netanyahu, Likud and the far right since the time of Menachem Begin have been wanting to annex the West Bank, all of it. And now with this new government, there's even talk about them annexing Gaza. So in the course of doing my research and learning the Palestinian narrative, going back to Hanan Ashwari, Gada Kami, Ramzi Baroud, all these intellectuals, and then also Jewish intellectuals like Ilan Pape and Avi Schleim, going back to them and revisiting people who, during my time of Christian Zionism, I had been told either they are anti-Semitic or they are self-hating Jews and I should just ignore them. Now I went back to them with an open mind, wanting to actually learn what they are saying and why they're saying it. And then this led me to platforms like the Electronic Intifada, for example, where I learned more about the Jewish lobby around the world, what they'd done to Jeremy Corbyn. And I started to realize that I was actually supporting something which was not what I had believed I was supporting and what I had been telling people I was supporting. So I came to the conclusion that I could no longer do my job, because the platform that I was in was not one to actually seek peace. It was simply to push the propaganda of Zionism and against the Palestinians.
Yes, and Pamela, if you tell our viewers about Christian Zionism, how do you define it? Is it like a religious movement? Is it a political movement? What is the aim behind the creation of such a body in the world?
Yes, I mean, it's very difficult to understand how people can do injustice to other people, And I think this is why so many people struggle to confront evil and injustice, is because it's so unnatural. Like, why would you even go out of your way to be cruel to another person? Surely in my context, it was just the Jews needed a safe place to live. The Palestinians and the Arabs hate them. And the Muslims are terrorists who hate them. So you must understand that Islamophobia is a cornerstone and a pillar of Christian Zionism and also Jewish Zionism. You have to make the other person an enemy. You have to make them evil. You have to make them subhuman, but in such a way that it looks like it's legitimate, that it's not evil, but it's legitimate, it's justified,
Yeah.
So Christian Zionism believes that in order for Jesus to return, the Jews must be ruling Jerusalem, they must be ruling all of the Holy Land, because all the other people who are there are not godly people. Now, the problem with this is that Christian Zionism couches itself completely in the Old Testament. It doesn't take into account the New Testament or the Quran. It doesn't take into account the existence of Christians or Muslims who all worship the God of Abraham. So Christian Zionism is actually a heresy. So I would not say it's a religious movement unless you want to call it a cult, but it's definitely a political movement in favor of colonization, in favor of Western domination, of white domination. It's very much like the Dutch Reformed Church in South Africa, how it supported apartheid, very much like the churches in America that supported slavery, very much like how the Catholic Church supported the colonization of the Americas and how the Anglican Church supported the colonization of the Africa and Asia, you know.
Yes,
So,
and Pamela, yes, and you and many people now found out the truth, the fact that Christian Zionism is like a political body trying to entrench the Zionist colonization of Palestine for their own agenda. And after discovering that, you become like a strong supporter of the Palestinian rights and the Palestinian cause. And just days ago, we heard of the Anglican Church in South Africa declaring Israel as an apartheid state. So is that due to the awareness you publish, the efforts that you make, you and like-minded people, I mean, and how such position by the Anglican Church would affect other churches and other institutions, whether in South Africa or in other areas in the world?
Well, this resolution by the Anglican Church is very much based on the work of the Palestinian people themselves to not give up on their struggle for justice. You know, they've been through 75 years of a Nakba, which, you know, the Zionists say they want to bring back part 2 of the Nakba. But the Palestinian people themselves never gave up on their own struggle. And the Anglican Church is very close to the Christian community of Palestine. And so this call by the Christian community of Palestine for the Christian community of the world to stand on the side of justice is what I think we can say is the driving force behind this move by the Anglican Church. And the Anglican Church is a very powerful global body of Christians. It's on a par with the Roman Catholic Church in terms of influence and geopolitical influence. And so this is a very big move. And I think the Palestinian Christian community must just continue to push for more to be done, because it's very good that the Anglican Church has declared Israel an apartheid state. But now it must push for sanctions against the state of Israel.
Yes, and Pamela, we know that the people who support justice for Palestine and who criticize the brutal actions of the Israeli occupation against the Palestinian women, the Palestinian children, we saw today how the Israeli soldiers, a number of Israeli soldiers were just beating Palestinian women in the occupied city of Hebron. This is a daily practice by the Israeli forces. People like you are accused by Israel or labeled as anti-Semites. So how do you respond to that? What's your comment on that?
You can only laugh, okay? Because that is like the most childish, arrogant thing that anyone can say. I mean, all anyone is actually asking for the Zionists to do is to introspect. Just take a moment, be a human being, and think about what you're doing. Is it right? Is it just? Is it progressive? Do you want your children to live in a world where everyone thinks that the Jews are a bunch of colonizing lunatics? Because this is what happens to the Jewish people because of Zionism. So the Zionists are very in the process of dehumanizing the Palestinians. They have dehumanized themselves even more. Because I don't know how you can do to people what they are doing to the Palestinians and still be able to go to sleep at night. I mean, it makes me think of the Nazi concentration camp guards who would kill Jews by day and at night go and play with their kids and have dinner and meet with their friends, you know? I mean, it's very ironic, but this is what's going on. So anyone who wants to call me an anti-Semite must just ask me what it means for a person who stands against racism to be a racist. It's a smokescreen, it's a red herring, and it's something which is so dead and stale now. I know what the Holocaust was. I was horrified by the Holocaust. That's why I became a Christian Zionist in the first place. I believe that the Jewish people have the right to live in peace and harmony anywhere in the world. And I also believe that the Jewish people are people who believe in God, and they are people who stand for justice around the world. Zionists are not Jewish people. because a Jewish person is someone who believes in God and the rule of God on this planet. Zionists are a law unto themselves. So if they want to call me an anti-Semite, they must tell me what is Semitic about them, because they are not Semitic in terms of their culture, because their culture is not the culture of the people who believe in the God of Abraham.
Yes, and of course, when we talk about the Zionist attacks and assaults against Palestinian citizens, at the same time, they have a lot of aggressive measures against the holy sites in the occupied city of Jerusalem. And just 2 days ago, there were reports on a museum built by the Zionist regime at the Umayyad palaces a few kilometers away, or meters, not kilometers, a few meters away from the Holy Mosque of Al-Aqsa. And we know of the excavations under the basement of Al-Aqsa Mosque. How do you think of this? Israel is trying to give this struggle like a religious pattern instead of a political struggle for independence, for justice, and for human rights. What's your take on that?
Well, you know, they know that religion touches people in a very deep way. This is the only reason why they've actually been able to escape scrutiny the way they have. You know, I mean, it's like during apartheid in South Africa, the white people who were oppressing black people convinced themselves that they were God's chosen people who had come here to turn all us black savages into civilized Christians. So they convinced themselves, and this is what these colonizers in Palestine are doing. They have convinced themselves that they are God's chosen people, that they are doing the work of God, and that anyone who stands in opposition to them is standing in opposition to God. And they've indoctrinated their children to believe this, you know, and so there's a cycle of indoctrination going on. And, you know, people who want to feel good about themselves by having power over other people, they are drawn to this type of thing. And so this is who it is. Look at someone like Itamar Ben-Gvir. You know, you can see he's a bully by nature because for some reason he's got that insecurity. So there's a lot of psychology here. There's a lot of spiritual destruction that has happened to people, and now it's playing out in these very negative behaviors. And so I think when people who are narcissistic can find something to justify their actions, it gives them an excuse not to have to introspect and to look at what they are doing from a humanistic and holistic perspective. So it works very well to their advantage to claim that this is a religious thing. Even what they're doing there at Al-Aqsa, they know very well that it is illegitimate for them to be there if they're actually basing what they are doing on the Torah. They are not allowed to be there until and if God would allow them to be there. And if they were basing it on the Torah, they would also acknowledge that the Christians and the Muslims are people of God and they must be treated with respect. And so no Jew who actually believes in God would allow themselves to desecrate Al-Aqsa because they know that that is the site where the God of Abraham is being remembered and praised. So it's completely political, and it just shows you the level of depravity and barbarism that's going on here, that they can try and desecrate the third most holy site of Islam, you know, the first Qibla, the place where Muhammad took his night's journey. I mean, this is a very sacred place for Muslims, and it should be a sacred place for all people who believe in the God of Abraham.
Yes, Pamela, I want to ask you this question because you said I was blind when you were Christian Zionist supporter, and after you began to support the cause of Palestine, you said, I can see now, but I feel that you are foresighted and you can even predict what could happen in the future based on the data and the facts that we have on the ground. You must have watched the speech by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the United Nations General Assembly when he showed the map, erasing Palestine from the map, considering that the land from the river to the sea as a land for Israel, taking advantage from the readiness of some Arab governments, not Arab people, Arab governments, to normalize with his government and to have normal relations. So, as an activist living outside of Palestine, do you get frustrated at such a news that there is normalization between some Arab governments and Israel? How do you feel about that?
Unfortunately, elitism is a problem across the world. You know, even here in Africa, the people who sold Africans to be slaves in the plantations in North and South America were African leaders themselves, because they had adopted an elitist perspective that allowed them to dehumanize their fellow Africans. And even when slavery ended, those same people took that money that they gained from slavery and invested in the new industries that were coming up in Africa. That's why in the south of the DRC, men, women, and children are now enslaved in the cobalt mines. That's why here in South Africa, mine workers were killed and shot at Marikana. You know, so elitism is a scourge across the world. It shows itself in things like the interest rates. Why do we have interest rates when more than 50% of the people of this world claim to worship the God of Abraham, who has outlawed the charging of interest? But because people are willing to put their own selfish interests before the interests of the people, and even while calling themselves believers in the God of compassion, mercy, justice, love, truth, and righteousness, you know, it just shows you that it says in the scriptures, money makes people believe that they are immortal. So I see this as an elitism that is manifesting itself with the leaders of the Muslim nations that are normalizing with Israel. They know that it has nothing to do with the benefit of their own people. They know that it's all about their own prestige and their own ability to use their countries and the natural resources of their countries to make more money and to be part of the global elite system of the powerful and the greedy who, I don't know, for some reason, just can't ever get enough money and power. So it is disappointing, but, you know, God doesn't give us challenges that he has not given us the wherewithal to overcome and to confront. So I also do believe that this is a challenge for the people of the world who believe in justice to really start being serious about believing in justice. And if we say we believe in God, then we should act like it. And I think this is what this moment presents.
Pamela Ngubane, a South African activist, strong supporter of the Palestinian rights and of justice for Palestine and for all peoples around the world. It has been a great honor having you on our program. Thank you very much, Pamela. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you. God bless you.
You're welcome. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. And from you, Samanazal. Have a nice time.